Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really getting into something I think a lot of people grapple with. That feeling of being, well, disconnected from your own body. Maybe even feeling like you're at war with it sometimes.
Hmm.
Our mission today is kind of a neurophysiological expedition, really. We're diving into the sources you've pulled together to figure out what's actually happening when we feel that way, and crucially, how do we find those pathways back? How do we, safely come home to ourselves?
Yeah, and it's important to stress this isn't just abstract psychology we're talking about. We're looking right at the body's operating system.
Okay.
The sources really lay out how reconnecting involves these fundamental principles from neuroscience, from psychology. It's about understanding self-regulation, distress tolerance. Basically how the nervous system itself handles, or sometimes mishandles, really overwhelming experiences.
Right, because so much of our behavior day to day isn't really a conscious choice, is it?
Right?
It's automatic. It's like the survival programming running constantly.
Exactly. Non-con.
So if we actually want to live intentionally, we have to interrupt those default settings. It reminds me of that Carl Jung quote, something like, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
That's a powerful way to put it.
And the sources on behavior change really hammer this home too. If a habit, even a habit of feeling stressed or disconnected, stays mindless, you can't really change it effectively. You've got to start with awareness, like radical awareness.
Okay, so let's start with that feeling, that at war with your body idea. It's crucial to get this first. That's a physiological thing. It's not a moral failing.
Right,
You know,
a consequence.
it's a direct and honestly a pretty logical consequence of the body being stuck in this hypervigilant state, constantly scanning for threat.
Mhm.
And the key thing is, this state actually changes the brain. It rewires how you process everything coming in.
Okay, so that rewiring, that brings us to the emotional brain, right? And how information gets prioritized. There's this concept, the low road, that neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux talks about. Can you kind of walk us through that race that happens when we sense potential danger?
Absolutely. It really is a race. We're talking milliseconds mattering here. So
Right.
any sensory input, something you see, hear, feel, it first hits the thalamus. Think of the thalamus as like the brain's main relay station.
Got it.
From there, the info splits.
Yeah.
Path one, the low road, is like an express lane,
Yeah.
straight from the thalamus to the amygdala.
And the amygdala is the alarm system, the quick danger node, danger check.
It does a really fast, kind of rough assessment. Is this bad? Is this threatening? And this happens before that information even gets to the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part, the part that adds context and rational thought.
Okay.
Path two, the high road, is the slower route. It goes through other areas like the hippocampus for memory context, and then up to the prefrontal cortex for that more detailed conscious analysis.
So while my thinking brain is still trying to figure out, is that a stick or a snake? The amygdala's already hit the panic button.
Pretty much, yeah.
But what happens when trauma enters the picture? How does that turn this useful alarm system into, well, a chronic problem?
Well, with trauma or something like PTSD, a couple of things happen. First, the amygdala's threat assessment becomes, let's say, overly sensitive. It dials up the intensity.
Okay.
And second, the filtering system, the high road involving the prefrontal cortex, it often gets weakened or compromised. It can't regulate the amygdala's alarm as effectively.
So the alarm bell rings louder, longer, and the rational brain struggles to turn it down or say, hey, it's actually okay.
Exactly. And that's when you see people losing control over those automatic emergency responses. Things like a really prolonged startle reflex, or bracing physically for no apparent reason, or those sudden aggressive outbursts the sources mention. The emotional brain is basically hijacking the system.
Keeping those first dibs and overriding rational thought?
Right. And what's really fascinating and kind of counterintuitive is how the body tries to cope with this constant internal chaos. It involves pain sensitivity, or rather insensitivity.
Numbness, that disconnected feeling people report.
Yes, the sources show a clear neurobiological link. When the amygdala fires off that trauma response, it can also trigger the release of endorphins, the body's natural opioids. This leads to analgesia, basically, reduced pain sensitivity.
Wow. So the body's trying to protect itself by numbing itself with its own internal painkillers.
That's what the evidence suggests. There's a striking research, for instance, with Vietnam veterans. When they were exposed to graphic combat reminders, they showed a significant decrease in pain sensitivity. And importantly, this effect could be blocked by naloxone, which blocks opioid receptors. This really points to the nerve pathways for these internal opioids becoming kind of overly sensitized by the chronic trauma activation.
That sounds like a really vicious cycle. The hypervigilance keeps the threat system firing, but the body's attempt to cope by numbing actually stops the person from feeling and processing the physical stuff tied to the trauma. It keeps everything locked inside.
Which leads us very neatly into this concept of the Medusa complex, which is described so well in this somatic trauma work, like in Waking the Tiger.
The Medusa complex? Freezing.
Yeah, when the threat feels totally overwhelming, inescapable, sometimes the rational brain overrides those primal urges to fight or flee. It enforces stillness, immobility, freezing.
Okay, so you're facing this massive threat, your nervous system floods with energy, preparing you to run or fight for your life.
Huge amounts of energy.
But if you can't act or your brain says don't move, where does all that energy go?
That's the crux of the pathology. Sources are really clear on this, that massive charge of kinetic energy, it doesn't just evaporate, it gets trapped, bound up in the muscles and the physiology.
Oh, wow.
And this creates its own awful cycle. The body is stuck in this super high energy aroused state, but it can't discharge it. So it's constantly compensating. And because it's stuck in this charged up, immobile state, the nervous system itself perceives ongoing danger, even when there isn't any.
So you end up physically rigid, maybe full of unexplained aches and tension, feeling like your own body is fundamentally unsafe or dangerous.
Exactly. Chronic tension, pain, dissociation. It all stems from this undischarged energy and the nervous system stuck in threat.
Which means the goal for healing has to be finding a way to let that energy out, to discharge it, but in a controlled, safe way that doesn't just re-trigger the whole overwhelming trauma response all over again.
Precisely. We need a roadmap, a way to guide the nervous system out of that defensive paralysis and back towards a state of feeling safe and engaged with the world.
Okay, so if we need a map, that leads us straight to the autonomic nervous system, the ANS, right? And specifically the work of Stephen Porges and his polyvagal theory.
Yes, absolutely. Porges' work really shifted the paradigm. It moves the focus away from just managing fear and emphasizes regulating our overall state of arousal. And crucially, it puts social relationships right at the heart of feeling safe and recovering.
So it's not just fight or flight anymore.
No, it's more nuanced than that. Porges showed the ANS is actually a hierarchy. It has subsystems that evolved over time. That's the phylogenetically ordered part.
Okay, evolution matters here. What are the layers?
So the oldest system, the one we share with reptiles, is mediated by the unmyelinated vagus nerve. This controls the most primitive form of self-preservation, immobilization. Think feigning death, or that vasovagal response where someone feints a complete shutdown.
The ultimate play-dead survival mechanism, total energy conservation.
Exactly. Then, evolving later, came the sympathetic nervous system. That's our mobilization system, the classic fight or flight. It's fast, burns a lot of energy, gets us ready to act.
Got it. Oldest is freeze, then fight-flight. What's the newest?
The newest, and this is unique to mammals, is what Porges calls the social communication system, or the social engagement system. And this is the key to our feeling safe, regulated, and connected.
Okay, the social engagement system. And this relies on a specific biological mechanism. You mentioned the vagal brake. We should probably pause here because this sounds technical but really important for understanding how we calm ourselves down.
It really is central. The vagal brake is powered by a different part of the vagus nerve, the mammalian vagus. Unlike the old, slow, unmyelinated vagus involved in shutdown, this part is myelinated. And its pathways, its efferent fibers, start in a specific spot in the brainstem called the nucleus ambiguus.
Okay, myelinated. That means faster signals, right? Like insulation on a wire. And why is that specific spot, the nucleus ambiguus, so important?
Exactly right. On myelination, it allows for speed and efficiency. The old vagus is slow. This new myelinated vagus allows for rapid, dynamic control over our internal state. We can shift quickly.
So we can go from alert back to calm much more fluidly. That sounds like resilience.
That's a big part of resilience, yes.
Yeah.
And the nucleus ambiguus is critical because it's like a hub. It coordinates the cranial nerves that control the muscles of our face and head. Think facial expressions, listening intently, the tone of our voice.
Ah, so all the things we use to connect with other people socially.
Precisely. It's the direct physiological link between our internal state, like our heart rate being calm, and how we interact externally, how we signal safety to others and perceive it from them.
Wow. Okay, so if this system is working well, if we have high vagal tone, that means this vagal brake is actively engaged. It's holding the heart rate down, keeping us calm.
Yes. Think of it as an active restraint. High vagal tone means the brake is on, promoting calmness. It's not just the absence of stress, it's an active state of calm regulation.
Okay.
When we need to mobilize quickly, say for fight or flight, the brain rapidly withdraws that brake. Heart rate shoots up, the sympathetic system takes over. But crucially, the ability to effectively re-engage the brake afterwards is what allows for calm behavioral recovery. It's the foundation for self-soothing.
But the source is really stress. This isn't just an internal thing. It's tied to social cues, right? If we activate those social engagement muscles, change our facial expression, our voice tone, it actually influences our internal state.
That's the beautiful synergy of the system. Activating those somatic muscles linked to social engagement. The ones controlled by the nucleus ambiguus actually send signals down the myelinated vagus to your heart and organs, triggering visceral changes that support a calm, engaged state.
So if I consciously soften my expression or try to speak in a calmer tone or really focus on listening to someone, I'm literally telling my own nervous system it's okay to calm down.
You are literally engaging the physiology of safety. Conversely, if someone's face is frozen, their voice is flat, they avoid eye contact. Their physiology is likely inhibiting that vagal brake, keeping them stuck in a more defensive state.
This totally reframes social connection. It's not just a nice-to-have psychological buffer, it's a neurobiological necessity for regulating ourselves.
It really is. Healing from trauma, in this view, is fundamentally about helping the nervous system shift away from those primitive states of defense, fight, flight, or freeze, and strengthening its capacity for safe, dynamic social engagement.
And that takes practice. It takes actively working with the system.
Exactly. So understanding the polyvagal map gives us what the state we're aiming for. Now we need the how. How do we actively intervene? How do we move from just knowing this stuff to actually, re-inhabiting our bodies safely?
Right, practical application.
Yeah.
The sources talk about renegotiation, and it seems like the absolute first step is developing somatic awareness, this felt sense idea.
Yes, facility with the felt sense. And this can be surprisingly difficult for people, especially if they've spent years disconnected. It means learning to notice what's physically present in your body without jumping straight to interpretation or story.
Okay, so it's like an awareness filter, separating the raw sensation from the meaning we instantly slap onto it.
That's a great way to put it. The sources really emphasize this. The moment you catch yourself thinking, this tightness means I'm anxious, or my stomach hurts because I'm worried about that meeting, you've added interpretation. You've left the pure felt sense.
And you're back in the mental narrative, which probably just fuels the anxiety or the worry.
Often, yes. So the practice is, okay, there's a buzzing in my chest. Instead of analyzing why it's buzzing, the job is just to observe the buzz itself. What's its quality? Is it sharp, dull? Where exactly is it? Does it move? Is it warm, cool? Just the raw data.
Radical physical observation in the present moment.
Right. And when you can sustain your attention purely on those bodily sensations, not getting lost in the emotion about the sensation, something interesting tends to happen. The intensity often starts to shift or lessen, or at least become less overwhelming.
Why does that happen? Is it just distraction?
It's more like interrupting the feedback loop. Normally, sensation triggers thought emotion, which triggers more sensation, and round it goes. Focusing on just the sensation breaks that cycle. You're not feeding the catastrophic interpretation. You're just feeling.
Okay, so mastering that sustained attention on the felt sense, that's the groundwork for the next step, which sounds like gradual exposure and this renegotiation process.
Exactly. We're essentially using that felt sense awareness to gently teach the body in really small, manageable doses that it can experience activation. It can feel that energy without going into complete overwhelm or shutdown.
Renegotiation. The goal is to, what, uncouple the freeze response from the terror that came with it?
Yes, precisely. Uncouple the immobility from the intense fear and helplessness. Because, as the sources describe, when people start to thaw out of that freeze state, that bound-up energy we talked about earlier, it can surface, sometimes quite intensely.
How does it surface?
It might be sudden surges of feeling maybe intense anger or terror, or even just uncontrollable shaking or trembling. It's that stored survival energy starting to move.
Okay, that sounds potentially terrifying in itself. If you react to that surge with fear and shut down again, you're right back where you started, aren't you?
That's the risk, which is why it has to be done gradually, incrementally. Within what the sources call relative safety, you use the felt sense as your guide.
How does that work? Titration.
Titration, exactly.
Yeah.
You learn to track the sensation. You allow a tiny bit of that energy or movement to happen, maybe just a subtle shift in posture, a slight tremor. You stay with the felt sense of that. And if it starts to feel like too much, you gently pull back, Maybe focus on your feet on the floor, find some ground,
Yeah.
but without completely shutting down or dissociating.
So it's like gently pendulating, moving a little bit into the activation, then back to a sense of safety or ground, back and forth.
That's a perfect way to describe it. This gradual rhythmic dipping in and out is how the nervous system learns dynamically that it can handle these sensations, that they don't have to lead to collapse. It learns safety through manageable experience.
And this process, this dynamic engagement, it starts to rebuild internal resources that were lost in the trauma, like resilient strength.
Yes, resilient strength,
Yeah.
which is described as the polar opposite of that learned helplessness that often comes with trauma.
Okay, and it's not just about being tough.
No, not static toughness. It's developed through two key things: grounding and springiness. Grounding is that feeling of stability, of being connected to the earth, centered in your physical self, like you can draw support from your environment.
Feeling your feet on the floor, that kind of thing.
That's a classic way to access it, yes. But just grounding, if you're stuck in freeze, could potentially just reinforce the immobility,
A
right?
good point. So you need something else.
You need springiness or buoyancy. This is the capacity to be grounded, but also flexible, to yield and adapt without getting knocked over, to move towards activation when needed, and then smoothly return to calm without getting stuck at either extreme.
So it's fluid stability, not rigid holding.
Exactly. It's this dynamic stability that allows the body to maybe complete those defensive movements, those impulses that got interrupted during the original overwhelming event.
Right. And there's one more piece here that sounds maybe controversial, but the sources say it's essential. Restoring a healthy relationship with aggression.
Yes, it's crucial to understand what's meant here. We're not talking about harmful violence. We're talking about healthy aggression as a biological capacity, meaning the ability to be vigorous, energetic, assertive, to mobilize energy effectively, to protect boundaries, to move towards goals, to face challenges. That life force, that energy is completely inaccessible when you're stuck in freeze or collapse.
So restoring that healthy aggression is about reclaiming your vitality, your power to act in the world.
Precisely. And when that happens safely, when you can access and direct that energy appropriately, that's where real empowerment comes from.
So empowerment isn't just a mental idea, like I feel powerful. It's the actual embodied experience of having the authority and the skill to direct your own energy effectively, especially when dealing with perceived threats. It's regaining that competence the body lost when it froze.
Beautifully put. It's mastering that response that was previously overwhelming. Okay, so we've talked about the neurophysiology, the polyvagal states, the somatic practices like felt sense and titration. But for all these changes to really stick, to become lasting, they need the right kind of internal environment to grow in.
Meaning our thoughts, our self-talk.
Exactly. The psychological habitat matters immensely. For the nervous system to genuinely internalize safety and learn to relax, we have to address the internal mental landscape, especially patterns of harsh self-judgment or criticism.
Which brings us to self-compassion. And again, the sources position this not just as a nice idea, but as a concrete neurobiological tool.
Absolutely. It's presented as a direct intervention against that internal threat system we discussed earlier, the part of us that scans for flaws and dangers, even within ourselves.
How does it work biologically?
Well, when we practice self-compassion, which involves kindness towards ourselves, recognizing our struggles are part of being human, common humanity, and balanced awareness of our feelings, mindfulness, we actually deactivate the threat defense system.
Okay.
And simultaneously, we activate the brain's care system, which is linked to affiliation and soothing. The downstream effects are measurable. Studies show self-compassion practice leads to lower levels of cortisol.
The main stress hormone, so less sympathetic nervous system activation.
Correct. And conversely, we see increases in heart rate variability, or HRV.
Which is a key marker of parasympathetic activity, right? That vagal brake being engaged.
Precisely. So by treating ourselves with understanding and kindness when we mess up or feel pain, instead of attacking ourselves, we are literally sending signals to our body.
Right.
It's safe, you're okay, the threat is manageable. It directly promotes that calm, regulated state.
It's such a paradox, isn't it? So many of us believe we need that harsh inner critic to stay motivated, to keep ourselves in line.
Right. We think self-criticism is protective or useful.
But the science seems to show the opposite. Criticism just triggers the threat response, makes us more defensive, more rigid, actually less able to learn or change effectively.
It creates a constant internal war zone, which is why the sources argue that deep healing often requires what's called radical self-acceptance.
Radical self-acceptance. That sounds big. What does it mean practically?
It's not about just letting yourself off the hook or pretending everything's perfect.
Yeah.
It means fundamentally stopping the war, stopping the judgment, the criticism, the constant evaluation, and instead embracing yourself as you are in this present moment, flaws and all.
Okay, but isn't that incredibly difficult and maybe even feels risky? Like if I stop criticizing myself, won't I just become lazy or complacent? What provides the motivation then?
That's a common fear. But radical self-acceptance is different from, say, self-esteem, which often depends on comparing ourselves favorably to others or meeting external standards. Acceptance is just acknowledging reality without fighting it. This is how things are right now. This is how I feel right now. Okay.
And here's the paradox. Truly accepting the present state without trying to manipulate it or escape it through criticism actually creates the psychological safety and stability needed for sustainable change to happen.
How so?
Because you're no longer operating from a place of threat or deficiency. Change becomes possible not as a desperate flight from self-hatred, but as a natural unfolding from a place of inner safety and self-care. You change because you value yourself, not because you hate yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It provides the secure base from which to explore making changes.
Ah.
Okay, so if we cultivate this internal safety through self-compassion and acceptance, how does that help solidify long-term shifts, like really breaking old patterns or sticking with these somatic practices?
This is where the idea of identity level updates comes in, drawing from sources on behavior change, like atomic habits. The idea is that lasting change isn't just about setting goals, it's about fundamentally shifting who you believe you are.
Our self-image. Exactly. We have a deep psychological need to act in ways that are congruent with our identity. If you see yourself as, say, someone who isn't good at managing stress, then feeling overwhelmed actually confirms that identity.
Right.
But if you start to cultivate a new identity, like I am someone who is learning to regulate my nervous system, or I am prioritizing my well-being, then setbacks or difficult moments become, well, just part of the learning process. Rather than proof of failure, they align with being a learner.
So those small daily actions we take, maybe doing just 5 minutes of that felt sense practice, or choosing to pause instead of reacting automatically, they're not just isolated wins.
They're more than that. They become votes. Tiny pieces of evidence that reinforce the new identity statement. See, I am the kind of person who takes a mindful pause. I am the kind of person who shows up for my practice.
And we do that because we want to reduce cognitive dissonance, that discomfort when our actions don't match our beliefs about ourselves.
Precisely. When your behavior contradicts your identity, it creates internal tension. To resolve it, you either change the behavior or change the identity. By consciously choosing and reinforcing a desired identity, first, I am resilient, I am calm, you create an internal pull that makes behaviors aligned with that identity feel more natural and easier over time.
The healthy choice becomes the congruent choice.
Right, and this whole internal landscape, our sense of safety, our identity, inevitably shapes how we connect with others too, particularly in our closest relationships.
Which links back to attachment theory, doesn't it? Our internal working model of relationships, how we expect closeness or fear rejection, based on our style, anxious, avoidant, or secure.
Absolutely. And you can see how this connects directly to nervous system states. Someone with, say, an anxious attachment style might be constantly scanning their partner for signs of disapproval or abandonment. Their nervous system is likely in a chronic state of low-level activation or threat.
The opposite of the calm, safe, socially engaged state we're aiming for.
Exactly. And someone with an avoidance style might feel threatened by too much closeness and constantly seek distance to feel safe, which also involves managing internal activation, often through suppression or shutdown.
And you often see that anxious avoidant dynamic play out where one person pursues, the other withdraws, and both people's nervous systems are just constantly triggered. It's exhausting.
It's a cycle of mutual activation, yeah. So moving towards internal security, building that resilient self, often involves consciously recognizing and stepping away from relationship patterns that consistently keep your nervous system on high alert.
And moving towards
Security, which, according to attachment research, is built on things like effective communication, being able to clearly, calmly state your needs, and having a partner who can respond appropriately to your emotional cues. The secure person tends to operate from a baseline of calm because they trust that connection is available and reliable.
So in a way, finding or building a secure relationship can be one of the most powerful external supports for doing this internal work of nervous system regulation.
It can be an incredibly powerful co-regulating environment, yes. The internal and external reinforce each other. #tag outro. So when we trace this whole journey we've discussed today, from understanding that lightning-fast amygdala alarm, the low road, all the way to the nuances of the polyvagal system, that sophisticated vagal brake, and the power of social engagement, what emerges is this really coherent map, I think.
Yeah, a map for reinhabitation.
Exactly. The path back home to yourself, it really seems to be this neurobiological journey. It involves making those unconscious automatic processes conscious, actively developing skills for physiological self-regulation through practices that engage the body, like tracking the felt sense, and crucially, cultivating an internal environment of safety, acceptance, and self-compassion.
Yeah, we've covered a lot, but the key takeaways really center on that. Understanding the mechanics, like the amygdala's role, the importance of discharging bound energy from the freeze response, the absolute centrality of the vagal brake for calm, and realizing that mastery starts not with just forcing yourself, but with mindful, curious engagement with your own internal world, with that felt sense.
Right. And seeing how we can actually use practices, maybe derived from somatic therapies or even mindfulness, to actively shape our nervous system towards safety and connection,
Yeah.
away from those old patterns of defense.
It confirms we have more agency than we might think in shifting these deep
It
patterns.
does. Which leads to a pretty interesting, maybe even provocative final thought, pulling from some of the behavioral science sources.
Okay.
The more we understand about how profoundly our environment shapes us, and that includes our internal environment, our neural pathways, our physiological state, the less reason we might have to attribute everything we do solely to some kind of completely independent, autonomous controlling agent, like pure willpower.
So shifting the focus.
Yeah, maybe shifting the focus away from trying to build better people through sheer force of will or self-criticism and more towards designing better environments. Environments both internal and external, neural and physical, that naturally support the choices we want to make, making resilience the easier path.
That's a fascinating lens. If that's true, if our behavior is so deeply influenced by our conditions, it poses a really practical question for everyone listening. What's one specific change you could make starting today in your habits or your environment, internal or external, to make the best choice, the choice aligned with well-being and regulation, the easiest choice?
It doesn't have to be monumental.
No, maybe it's just setting a reminder for those few minutes of felt sense tracking, or consciously choosing a calming activity when stressed, or even just rearranging a physical space to feel safer. What small environmental tweak could start to redefine that internal relationship with yourself? Something to think about.